It was the kind of night where everything felt just a little too perfect. The house was quiet, the kids were tucked in bed, and my wife, Emily, was humming softly in the kitchen, her back turned as she prepared a late-night snack. I remember sitting there, a half-empty glass of bourbon in my hand, thinking how lucky I was. At least, that's what I told myself. But there was something nagging at me, a feeling I couldn't quite shake, a shadow in the back of my mind, whispering that all wasn't as it seemed. I didn't know then that this would be the night everything unraveled. The signs had been there for months, little things I had brushed off as nothing. Emily spending more time on her phone, her laughter at jokes I wasn't part of, and the sudden, unexplained late-night errands. I'd catch her smiling at messages, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. But I never pushed. I didn't want to believe there was anything wrong. That would mean questioning the foundation of the life we had built together over the last years. That night, while she was still in the kitchen, her phone buzzed on the counter beside me. I wasn't the snooping type, but this time, something inside me told me to look. I glanced over and saw the message preview light up the screen. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind raced as I tried to process what I just read. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of disbelief, anger, and a deep, gnawing pain that I didn't know was possible. But I knew I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know more. The days that followed were a blur of quiet, calculated rage. I started paying closer attention, piecing together fragments of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Her excuses for being late home from work, the extra care she suddenly put into her appearance, and the cryptic messages she quickly deleted from her phone. All of it began to paint a picture I couldn't ignore. The breaking point came the following weekend. I told Emily I'd be away on a work trip, needing time to think. In reality, I stayed in town, enlisting the help of my best friend, Eric, to keep an eye on things while I played ghost in my own life. He hesitated at first, but when I told him what I suspected, his jaw tightened, and he promised to help. That Saturday night, Eric called me, his voice tight with anger. "Luke, you need to come home," he said. "She's not alone." When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the unfamiliar car parked outside. My hands were shaking as I stepped out of my truck, adrenaline coursing through me. I opened the door to our home and heard it instantly, laughter, muffled voices, and then a sound that made my stomach drop. It was her, Emily, giggling like a teenager. I crept up the stairs, every step a knife in my gut. When I reached the bedroom, I stood frozen outside the door, listening to the sounds of betrayal. My wife's voice, soft and teasing, mingled with the deeper tones of a man I didn't recognize. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, ready to face the nightmare head-on. Standing in the doorway, I froze. There they were, Emily, my wife of over a decade, and some stranger whose name I didn't care to know. They didn't even notice me at first. She was draped across him, her laughter echoing in the bedroom I had built for us with my own hands. That sound, her laugh, once my favorite melody, now cut through me like shattered glass. When Emily finally turned her head and saw me, the color drained from her face. The man scrambled, pulling a blanket over himself like it could shield him from the fury I could feel radiating from me. Emily stammered, "Luke, I can explain." "Explain what, Emily?" I interrupted, my voice cold and steady, despite the storm raging inside me. "How you brought a stranger into our bed. How you threw away years of marriage for this." The man, realizing his options were limited, started mumbling something about leaving. I stepped aside, waving him toward the door. "Go ahead," I said, my tone dripping with disdain. "Run. But don't forget your shoes. Wouldn't want you leaving any excuses to come back." He darted past me, his head down, clutching his clothes like a guilty teenager sneaking out after curfew. The door slammed behind him, leaving just me and Emily in the room. I could see her scrambling for something to say, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Please, Luke, let's talk about this," she pleaded. Her voice cracked, tears welling up in her eyes. "Talk. Now you want to talk." I spat. Where was this urge to talk when you were sneaking around behind my back? When you brought someone else into our home, into my bed? The tears came fast, streaming down her face as she broke into sobs. But I wasn't buying it. Not now. Not after what I'd just seen. I was lonely, she finally said, her voice trembling. You've been so distant, and I felt like you didn't care anymore. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. That's your excuse. I've been killing myself trying to give you the life you wanted. Every extra hour I put in at work, every late night, it was for us. And while I was doing that, you decided to fix things by sleeping with someone else. Her sobs grew louder, but my sympathy was gone, buried beneath the weight of her betrayal. I couldn't stay there, not in that room that now felt suffocating. I turned and walked out, ignoring her desperate cries behind me. I sat in the dark living room, trying to steady my breathing. The anger coursed through me, but beneath it, a deeper pain was clawing its way to the surface. This was the woman I had loved, the mother of my children. I thought about the mornings we'd spent laughing over coffee, the quiet nights watching movies on the couch. Were those moments lies too? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up planning. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. Emily needed to understand the gravity of what she had done, and I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. The next day, I started gathering evidence. Her texts, her emails, anything I could find that would expose the full scope of her betrayal. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for our kids, to make sure they would stay with me when the dust settled. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I wasn't about to let her selfish actions tear apart the only stability they had. But that wasn't enough. I wanted her to pay. I wanted her to look in the mirror every day and remember the consequences of her choices. By Monday, my plan was in motion. I called my lawyer, explaining everything. I had the evidence, and I wanted to move fast. If Emily thought she could waltz back into this house like nothing had happened, she had another thing coming. That evening, as she tried to talk to me again, her face still red and puffy from crying, I finally gave her a glimpse of what was coming. You wanted excitement, Emily. You wanted something new. Well, congratulations. You're about to get more excitement than you ever bargained for. Her face fell, her tears starting up again. But this time, I felt no pity. She had made her choice. Now it was time for her to live with it. By Tuesday, the wheels were fully in motion. I stayed calm and methodical, focusing on the one thing I could control, how I responded to this disaster. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be falling apart. She kept hovering around me, trying to talk, her voice drenched in guilt and desperation. She said that morning, her eyes swollen from another night of crying. I know I messed up, but we can work through it, can't we? For the kids. I looked up from the coffee. I wasn't even drinking, my voice icy. For the kids. Now you care about them. Were you thinking about them when you invited another man into their home? That shut her up. She slinked away, leaving me in peace, but I could feel her watching me from the corner of the room. It was like she knew I wasn't going to just let this slide, and she was terrified of what was coming next. She had every reason to be. By mid-afternoon, I had the lawyer draft the papers. Divorce, full custody of the kids, and no alimony. The evidence I had, photos of her texts, screenshots of her explicit conversations, and even the financial records showing money she'd spent on hotel rooms, would ensure I had the upper hand in court. But that wasn't enough. I wanted more than a clean break. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. That evening, I decided it was time for the first strike. I sat Emily down in the living room, my lawyer's draft in hand. I thought you should be the first to know what's happening next, I said, my voice calm but sharp. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling as she reached for them. Divorce? She whispered. Please don't do this. Think about the kids. I am thinking about the kids. I snapped, cutting her off. You didn't just betray me, Emily. You betrayed us. You betrayed them. Do you think they'll ever respect you when they find out what you did? Her face crumpled as the reality of it hit her. She tried to argue, to plead, but I wasn't listening anymore. I leaned back, my arms crossed. This isn't just about the divorce, I said. Oh no, Emily. You've taken something from me, something I can never get back. So, I'm going to make sure you know exactly what it feels like to lose everything. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice trembling. You'll find out soon enough, I said, standing and heading for the door. But first, you should start packing. Because you're not staying in my house anymore." The look on her face was pure panic. She stammered something about having nowhere to go, but I was already halfway out the door. I spent the rest of the evening at Eric's place, laying out the final steps of my plan. It wasn't just about taking back control of my life. It was about showing Emily that actions have consequences. The next morning, I started notifying people, friends, family, even her parents. I didn't shy away from the details, though I kept it respectful for the kids' sake. "I thought you should know what's been going on," I told her mother over the phone, my tone steady. "I'm filing for divorce, and Emily's choices are the reason why." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before her mother finally spoke. "Luke, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice heavy with shame. "I had no idea." "Neither did I replied, the bitterness creeping into my tone. "But now, everyone will." By the end of the day, the news had spread. I started getting calls from mutual friends, all offering their support. Even Emily's closest friend, Rachel, reached out. "Luke, I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I can't believe she did this to you." To the kids, "Is there anything I can do?" "Just be there for the kids," I said. "They're the only ones I care about in this mess." That night, when I got home, Emily was sitting on the couch, her suitcase by her feet. She looked up at me, her face pale and her eyes hollow. "I heard what you've been telling people," she said quietly. "Good," I replied, walking past her. "Now everyone knows exactly who you are." "Luke, please." "Get out," I said, cutting her off. "You've got somewhere else to be, don't you? Maybe with him." Her sobs followed me up the stairs, but I didn't care. She had made her bed. Now it was time for her to lie in it. The morning after I threw her out, the house felt eerily quiet. The kids were at my parents' place for the weekend, thank God. They didn't need to see any of this yet. I stood in the kitchen with my coffee, staring out the window at the empty driveway. No Emily. No betrayal under my roof. It should have felt like a victory, but instead, it felt hollow. I was still angry, furious, really, but there was this creeping sense of something else underneath. Loss, maybe? Regret? No, I couldn't go there. Not after what she'd done. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of it. A text from Rachel, Emily's best friend. "Hey, just wanted to check on you. Heard she's staying at her sister's. Let me know if you need anything." I didn't reply. Not yet. I wasn't ready to deal with the pity, even if it was well-meaning. Instead, I spent the day tying up loose ends. Meetings with the lawyer to finalize the papers. Every step was a reminder of the mess my life had become, but I stayed focused. Emily had destroyed the life we built together, but I wasn't going to let her take me down with it. By evening, though, I was restless. The house felt too big, too empty. I was used to the noise, the kids laughing, Emily humming in the kitchen, even the stupid sound of her favorite reality shows blaring from the TV. Now, it was just me and my thoughts, and they weren't doing me any favors. That's when I decided to dig deeper into her betrayal. I hadn't gone through everything yet. There were still messages, emails, things I couldn't bring myself to look at in the heat of the moment. But now I needed to know. I opened her laptop, which she'd stupidly left behind in her rush to pack. It didn't take long to guess her password, our wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first thing I found was an email chain between her and him. His name was Jacob, some nobody from her office, a middle manager I vaguely remembered meeting once at a holiday party. He was exactly the kind of guy I hated, smug, overly confident, the type who thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. The emails were explicit, each one like a knife to the gut. They weren't just sleeping together. They were planning. Secret getaways, long lunches, nights when I thought she was working late. They had it all mapped out, right down to the excuses she'd feed me to keep me off their trail. But the worst part? They didn't just talk about their affair. They talked about me. "He's so clueless," Jacob wrote in one email. "I almost feel bad for him." "Almost?" Emily replied. They laughed about my long work hours, my trust in her, even the way I tried to surprise her with little gestures, flowers, date nights, things I thought showed how much I cared. Reading it felt like being gutted with a dull knife. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. How could she do this to me? To us? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the living room, staring at the divorce papers on the coffee table. I could end it all right here, file the papers, walk away, and never looked back. But the thought of her walking away unscathed, starting over with Jacob like nothing had happened, made my blood boil. She didn't get to win. Not after everything. The next morning, I called Eric. "Luke, are you okay?" he asked, concerned, lacing his voice. "Not really," I admitted, "but I need your help," he said without hesitation. "I want her to feel this, the way I'm feeling it, and I think I know how." By the time I hung up, my plan was clear. I wasn't going to just expose her for what she'd done. I was going to make sure her perfect little world came crashing down, just like mine had. The first step was Jacob. I needed to find out everything about him, his work, his family, anything I could use. And I knew just where to start. I reached out to Rachel, keeping the conversation casual at first. She didn't know about my plan, and I wasn't about to drag her into it. But when I asked her about Emily's office, she let something slip. "Jacob," she said when I brought up his name. "Oh, he's married. His wife's really sweet, too. I met her at the office Christmas party last year." Bingo! I thanked Rachel and hung up, a new fire burning in my chest. Emily and Jacob thought they were untouchable, that they could destroy my life and walk away without a scratch. They were wrong. The moment Rachel mentioned Jacob's wife, everything clicked into place. He had a life too, a wife, maybe kids, people who trusted him just like I had trusted Emily. And just like me, they probably had no idea what kind of betrayal was happening right under their noses. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. I spent the rest of the day digging into Jacob's life. It didn't take much. A quick search on social media led me to his wife, Laura. Her profile was open for the world to see. Pictures of her and Jacob at their anniversary dinner, smiling together on a family vacation. Even photos of their young daughter. Seeing those pictures hit me harder than I expected. Not because I felt sorry for Jacob, he deserved everything that was coming to him, but because it reminded me of what I'd lost. The life Emily and I had built wasn't so different from theirs. And just like that, she'd torn it all apart for some cheap thrill. I knew I couldn't reach out to Laura directly. Not yet. I needed more proof, something undeniable. So, I called Eric again. "Do you still have that private investigator's contact?" I asked. Eric hesitated. "Yeah. But are you sure you want to go down this road, Luke? This could get messy." "It's already messy," I said. "I need to know everything about this guy. Where he goes, who he sees, all of it." Eric didn't push back after that. By the end of the day, I had the investigator on the case. I gave him everything I had, Jacob's name, where he worked, even the emails I'd found on Emily's laptop. "Give me a week," the investigator said. "I'll get you what you need." While I waited for the results, I turned my focus back to Emily. She was still trying to reach me, her texts and voicemails coming in waves. At first, they were full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. But as the days went on, her tone shifted. "Why are you doing this?" One message read, "I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Don't throw everything away." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. She was the one who had thrown everything away, not me. And now she was panicking, realizing just how badly she had underestimated me. On Friday, the investigator called with his first update. "Jacob's been busy," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Your wife isn't the only one he's been seeing." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" "He's got at least one other woman on the side. I've got pictures of him meeting her at a hotel downtown. It seems like this guy's made a hobby out of cheating." I sat back, the pieces falling into place. Jacob wasn't just a cheater. He was a serial liar. A man who built his life on deception. And now, I had the proof to tear it all down. By the time the investigator sent me the pictures, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I printed out everything, the emails, the photos, even screenshots of Emily's messages to him. I put it all in an envelope, along with a note for Laura. "You deserve to know the truth. I'm sorry it had to come from me." The next morning, I drove to their house. My heart was pounding as I slipped the envelope into their mailbox, but I didn't hesitate. This wasn't about guilt or second-guessing myself. This was about doing what needed to be done. That evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. "Hello. Is this Luke?" a woman's voice asked, trembling. "Yes," I said. "This is Laura," she said. "I got your letter." There was a long pause. and I could hear the emotion in her voice as she continued. I don't even know what to say. Is this all real? It's real, I said softly. I'm sorry, Laura. I've been where you are, and I know how much this hurts. But you deserve to know the truth. For the next half hour, we talk. I told her everything, how I found out, what I'd uncovered, and how Emily and Jacob had betrayed us both. She cried as she told me about the little lies Jacob had been telling her for months, all the time she had doubted herself when her gut told her something was wrong. Thank you, she said finally. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but thank you for telling me. After we hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't the only one carrying this weight. Laura knew the truth now, and she could decide what to do with it. But for me, the fight wasn't over yet. After the call with Laura, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at the now-cold coffee in front of me. A small part of me felt relief, knowing Jacob's wife was no longer in the dark. But the larger part, the angrier, vengeful side, still wasn't satisfied. Emily and Jacob had taken so much from me, and I wasn't done making sure they felt the consequences. The next day, I got a text from Laura. Can we meet? There's something I want to talk to you about. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between her house and mine. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when Laura walked in, her expression told me everything. She was holding it together, but just barely. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sitting down across from me. No problem, I said. How are you holding up? She shook her head, her eyes glassy. Not great, honestly, but I've made a decision. I'm filing for divorce. I nodded, respecting her resolve. That's the right call. He doesn't deserve you. She looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. There's more, she said quietly. I want to make sure he doesn't just walk away from this like nothing happened. And I think you feel the same way. I leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. Laura laid out her plan. She had already spoken to a lawyer and was preparing to use the evidence I had given her as part of her divorce case. But she wanted to do more than that. Jacob was a rising star at their company, and she knew exposing his behavior could ruin him professionally. I don't want him to lose his job for me, she said, her voice steady. But he's been using his position to manipulate women, and people deserve to know. I couldn't argue with that. Jacob had preyed on more than just his wife. He had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. Laura and I agreed to coordinate. She would confront Jacob at home, making it clear she had all the evidence she needed. Meanwhile, I would deliver the same evidence to their company's HR department. That afternoon, I drafted an email to their HR manager, attaching everything, the photos, the emails, the texts. I kept it professional, simply stating that an employee was engaging in unethical behavior that could reflect poorly on the company. I hovered over the send button for a moment, my finger trembling. But then I thought about Emily, about the months of lies, about Jacob smirking at my expense. I hit send. The fallout was swift. Within hours, Jacob was called into a meeting with HRF. Laura kept me updated, texting me every detail. She told me how Jacob had tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the evidence was undeniable. By the end of the day, he was escorted out of the building, his reputation in tatters. Emily wasn't spared either. News of the affair spread quickly among her colleagues, thanks to whispers that always seemed to travel faster than facts. By the end of the week, she had resigned for personal reasons. But that wasn't the end of her suffering. The divorce papers I had filed were moving forward, and my lawyer was relentless. Thanks to the evidence of her infidelity, I had a strong case for full custody of the kids and no alimony. Emily tried to fight back, but she was in no position to win. The day we went to court, she sat across from me, looking like a shadow of the confident woman I had once loved. Her lawyer tried to argue that she deserved a fair settlement, but the judge wasn't having it. The evidence was clear. Emily had betrayed me, and she wasn't going to benefit from it. When the ruling came down, full custody for me, no alimony for her, Emily broke down in tears. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. Later that evening, Laura called me again. How are you feeling? She asked. I paused, thinking about it. Better, I think, I said. It's not over yet, but at least now I feel like I'm in control again. Good, she said. You deserve that. There was a moment of silence before she added, "You know, it's strange. I never thought I'd find someone who understands what this feels like. But I'm glad I found you." "Me too," I admitted. As we ended the call, I realized something. This whole ordeal had shattered my life, but it had also given me a chance to rebuild. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could move forward. Months had passed since that fateful night when everything unraveled. My life, once wrapped up in the illusion of a perfect marriage, had been rebuilt piece by piece. The divorce was finalized, and the kids were thriving in the stability I had fought so hard to give them. Emily, on the other hand, had faded into the background of my life, a bitter memory that no longer held power over me. But this story doesn't end with bitterness. It ends with something else. After Jacob was fired and his marriage dissolved, Laura and I stayed in touch. At first, it was out of necessity, sharing updates on the fallout of the chaos we'd both endured. But over time, those calls and texts became something more. We began to meet in person, grabbing coffee or dinner when our schedules allowed. It started innocently enough, two people leaning on each other for support. But there was an undeniable connection between us, one built on shared pain and an understanding few others could offer. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Laura turned to me. "Do you ever wonder if this was all supposed to happen?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I mean, maybe we were meant to go through this. To lose the people we thought we loved so we could find something better." I thought about that for a moment. It was hard to see the betrayal and heartbreak as anything other than devastation. But looking at Laura, seeing the strength she had found in herself, I realized she might be right. Maybe I said finally, or maybe we just refused to let them break us. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that I hadn't seen in months. "Either way, I'm glad I found you, Luke." I reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding, about moving forward, about hope. Emily tried to reach out a few times after the divorce, mostly under the guise of wanting to see the kids. But I knew better. She wasn't looking for reconciliation with them. She was looking for a way back into the life she had destroyed. I set firm boundaries. The kids would see her, but only on my terms. I refused to let her use them as a way to manipulate her way back into my life. And eventually, she stopped trying. As for Jacob, the last I heard, he was struggling to find work. His reputation had been so thoroughly dismantled that no company wanted to touch him. Had flourished. She moved into a new place with her daughter and started a job at a nonprofit, throwing herself into work that actually made her happy. We saw each other often, and the more time we spent together, the more I realized something I hadn't dared to believe after everything I'd been through. I was happy again. One evening, Laura and I were sitting on my back porch, the kids asleep upstairs, and the stars twinkling above us. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice soft. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. All the time I said, "What do you see?" I paused, thinking about how far we'd come. "Something good," I said finally. "Something we both deserve." She smiled up at me, her eyes shining. "I think so too." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The road to that moment hadn't been easy. It was paved with betrayal, heartbreak, and anger. But it had also led me here, to a place of healing, of hope, and of something new. They say that when one chapter ends, another begins. And as I sat there under the stars with Laura, I realized that this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.